Avengers Endgame has many different roles to play. It's not only serving as a conclusion to Marvel Studios' 22-film saga up to this point, it's also serving as a farewell to a number of characters. The movie's already got its hands full, but somehow it also managed to address a couple of plot holes from earlier films. Let's take a look at these as well as other MCU plot holes left hanging. Avengers Endgame needed to do a lot of things right in order to satisfy fans of Marvel's Cinematic Universe. Between wrapping up 10 years and 21 films, directors Joe and Anthony Russo and screenwriters Stephen McFeely and Christopher Marcus had their work cut out for them. You know what? Saying these guys had their work cut out for them doesn't really do it justice. Let's just take a moment and really try to put ourselves in Marvel Studios' creative team's headspace. Think of it. You have to somehow find a way to wrap up all the different characters and storylines that have been up in the air since 2008's Iron Man. You have to decide who will live and who will die. All the while, you're trying to figure out how to set up a bazillion different sequels, from Black Panther to Spider-Man and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Somehow, despite all the expectations piled against them, the Russos managed to pull it off. They created a big, epic finale that managed to be exciting, hilarious, heartbreaking, and most importantly, satisfying. Avengers Endgame is a worthy conclusion to the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Infinity Saga. But when you have so many creative minds churning out so many different films in one series, you run the risk of the too many cooks in the kitchen scenario. All these different filmmakers' ideas and styles start to pile up, and soon they're walking all over each other and everything explodes. Okay, maybe there aren't any actual explosions, we just wanted to add that last bit because explosions always make things more exciting. Thankfully, Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios and the man responsible for spearheading Marvel's Cinematic Universe, has done a remarkable job steering this massive ship. His entrusting the big finale of the franchise to the Russos was an inspired move. They'd already cut their teeth in the Marvel world with Captain America the Winter Soldier. Then they went and proved that they could handle a gargantuan ensemble and dozens upon dozens of subplots with Captain America Civil War. The Russos have always gone out of their way to ensure audiences have a memorable and coherent viewing experience. They've commented time and time again on how important it is that the events in their films make sense. When working with screenwriters McFeely and Marcus, which by the way sounds like a great name for a detective duo, the Russos meticulously walk through each story beat to make sure that there aren't any gaping plot holes. But alas, despite all the work, there are bound to be little story bits and character moments that just don't add up. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is full of them. It's just something that's bound to happen when you have this many movies with this many different creators. For instance, how about the Bifrost in the first Thor? The Bifrost links Asgard to Earth, but by the end of the film, the connection is severed. It's played as a huge deal. Not that this ends up mattering much in the grand scheme of things. After Thor the Dark World, Jane disappears into the realm of occasional name drops and briefer-than-brief cameos. But hold on, wait a minute. In Joss Whedon's first Avengers film, Thor just shows up out of nowhere. There's a brief comment from Loki about the Allfather conjuring up enough dark energy to re-bridge the two worlds, but that's it. Plus, you've got the Rainbow Bridge, which was destroyed in Thor 1. It shows up again in Thor the Dark World, fully repaired with no explanation. But the Rainbow Bridge is just the beginning of the MCU's many plot holes. There's plenty more where that came from. There's also an odd moment in Captain America the Winter Soldier where Doctor Strange's name gets dropped as one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s persons of interest.
Bruce Banner, Stephen Strange, anyone who's a threat to Hydra.
Only Doctor Strange wouldn't be released until 2016, so why would he be considered a person of interest? Or what about the moment in the first Guardians of the Galaxy where the Nova Corps mentions that Gamora's entire planet was wiped out by Thanos? But in Avengers Infinity War, it's revealed that Thanos only wiped out half of her home planet's population.
Because you murdered half the planet.
And of course, we have to address that infamous title card in Spider-Man Homecoming. You know, the one that reads 8 years later. This implies that Homecoming's events take place 8 years after the attack on New York City from the first Avengers film. Only once you start to do the math, and we did, as much as we hate math, Marvel Studios even came right out and admitted the title card doesn't make any sense. They did, however, try to patch things up with a line of dialogue in Avengers Infinity War. Tony Stark mentions that film's events take place 6 years after the first Avengers.
Thanos has been inside my head for 6 years.
Speaking of Tony Stark, didn't he give up being Iron Man at the end of Iron Man 3? He gets that surgery and no longer requires his mini-arc reactor to save his life. He even chucks the thing over a cliff. But in Avengers Age of Ultron, he's up and running again. No explanation, no nothing. Maybe he had a change of heart. Literally. Yeah, it's a pretty badly written joke there. And what about all the times the Avengers never showed up to combat a threat on Earth? We're talking about things significant enough to demand their attention. Like how about in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 when Ego shows up to consume the Earth and several other planets? You're telling me that wasn't important enough to demand the Avengers' attention? The fate of the planet is at stake? Come on! To be fair, Marvel Studios does manage some other decent fixes too. We'd be remiss to not mention the mysterious Infinity Gauntlet stored in Asgard. There's a great little joke where Hela, Lady Death herself, knocks it off its pedestal, announcing it's fake. It's nothing fancy, and some fans might argue it's a bit of a cheap attempt to correct this error. But hey, gets the job done. Now, let's be clear. Avengers Endgame doesn't fix all of the plot holes mentioned, but that's not really a huge deal. It doesn't seem particularly interested in fixing plot holes, nor should it be. It isn't Endgame's job to fix all these little bits and pieces that don't add up in previous MCU entries. That being said, whether on purpose or otherwise, Endgame does manage to repair a couple issues raised in Marvel Studios' preceding films. First and foremost, we've got a couple plot holes with Loki that Endgame manages to fix. The first one isn't really a plot hole, but just some general confusion. When Disney announced a Loki series for their new streaming service, there was the question of when it would be taking place. Loki dies at the start of Infinity War, and he spends most of the Thor trilogy in prison or in disguise. Endgame offers something of a loophole for this, though. When the Avengers travel back in time to 2012 to recover one of the Infinity Stones from the Battle of New York City, their plan goes awry. Loki manages to get a hold of the Tesseract again and disappears before anyone can stop him. So maybe the Disney Plus series will follow Loki's wacky adventures through this alternate timeline. The other Loki plot hole solved by Endgame started in Age of Ultron. So when Loki was defeated in the first Avengers, Black Widow had the Mind Stone scepter in her grasp. Remember that? She used it to close the giant portal hovering above New York City. But wait a second, at the beginning of Age of Ultron, Earth's mightiest heroes have assembled to recover the scepter from Hydra's grasp? Somehow, Hydra had gained possession of it and had been using it for twisted experiments. Those experiments resulted in the creation of both Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. But how did Hydra get a hold of the scepter if Black Widow had it at the end of the first Avengers? An official tie-in comic entitled Avengers Age of Ultron, this sceptered Isle attempted to address this plot hole. In it, two S.H.I.E.L.D. scientists attempt to research the scepter and the Tesseract. Both scientists are frustrated with their positions, and when Hydra comes calling, they don't hesitate to jump ship at S.H.I.E.L.D. to join the Hydra-hailing ranks. This comic was released during Marvel's big push to interweave all its various mediums, whether they be movie, TV, or comics, but these tie-in comics infrequently hold any story weight within the actual films. Most of the time, these comic books are ignored. Take Guardians of the Galaxy, for instance. James Gunn outright ignored a prelude comic that led to the events of the first Guardians film. Those involved with the Marvel Cinematic Universe have this mentality of, if it didn't happen in one of the movies, it didn't happen at all. So having this little side story doesn't really solve the issue. Endgame, however, does make an attempt. The time travel storyline shows us what happened immediately following the Avengers' victory and Loki's defeat. Turns out that the same Hydra agents that would end up causing so much trouble for Captain America in 2014's Winter Soldier were present. They managed to convince the Avengers to hand over the scepter so they can adopt its technology. Little did the Avengers realize what they were actually doing. The chaos of this aftermath could also allow for those incognito Hydra agents to hand off the scepter and claim it was lost in the mayhem. Ant-Man and Doctor Strange also have strange introductions into Marvel's cinematic universe that could qualify as plot holes. Scott Lang's introduction to Hank Pym and Stephen Strange's introduction to the Ancient One seemed a bit out of nowhere. Why would Pym and the Ancient One see these two as people worth putting their trust in? Well, what if time travel was introduced to the mix? This theory comes from Reddit user HypedUp80. They suggest Scott and Doctor Strange utilize time travel in order to gain the trust of their mentors.
I need you to be the Ant-Man.
Or how about this? What if when Pym was telling Scott he's been watching him for some time, he was subtly hinting at learning more about Scott through Pym's experiences in the quantum realm? Likewise, the Ancient One has possession of the Time Stone. It's clear she knows of Stephen Strange's importance and how powerful he'll become. Yeah, alright, it's a bit of a stretch. The reality is that these conveniences happened because the plot needed them to in order for the story to move forward. Still, we're willing to bet anything's possible now that time travel's been introduced to the Marvel mix. So, Avengers Endgame might not have fixed all these plot holes and little inconsistencies. That's okay though. The fact that the Russos addressed any of them at all is a testament to how devoted they are to pleasing fans all over the globe. Did we really need an explanation about Loki's scepter and how it ended up in Hydra's hands? Not really. but the explanation is provided by Endgame anyway. That's pretty awesome. When it comes down to it, the responsibility of any sequel is to tell a good story. If you can fix plot problems caused by previous entries in the process, more power to ya. But that shouldn't be the primary focus. Avengers Endgame goes out of its way to be satisfying in every possible regard, including doing a bit of MCU cleanup. Kudos to you, Marvel Studios. Avengers Endgame might not have answered every question you had, though. Are there MCU plot holes you wish had been addressed in Endgame? Is there anything that you were surprised they wrapped up? Let us know in the comments below, and if you feel so inclined, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Until next time, true believers!